For more on the dire warning over famine, I spoke to Noah Gottschalk. He's a senior humanitarian policy advisor at Oxfam America. Here's what he had to say about this potential humanitarian crisis of immense proportions.
The sad thing about the situation in South Sudan is that the writing has been on the wall for quite some time. This is a crisis that's completely and totally man-made, and it's been really building and growing over several years, and we have the resources collectively as the international community to actually prevent it from happening, but that hasn't happened yet. And as a result, we saw parts of the country slide into famine as declared on Monday by the UN and the government of South Sudan itself. For individual donors to wait until a famine is declared to start ponying up the cash is really a problem, because so many of the lives that need to be saved before a famine is actually declared.
So action, reaction. I mean, you have to be ahead of the game.
Exactly.
So describe for me, it's not regionally, you're looking at other countries also on the brink, right?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that's really challenging right now in the world is that we're facing an unprecedented number of humanitarian crises, and that includes an unprecedented amount of displacement. 65 million people or more are currently displaced around the world. That's 1 in every 113 people or something of that order. It's a huge, huge amount. It's unprecedented in recorded human history, and that's making it more and more difficult for humanitarian agencies to respond, particularly when more funding isn't available to respond to people. That's why we have to be more efficient, faster, and be able to meet people's needs more directly than we currently are.
What are some of the other countries that concern you?
Well, right now, the South Sudan is where famine has been declared, but the UN has put 3 other countries sort of on watch. So that includes Somalia, right by South Sudan, northeastern parts of Nigeria, as well as Yemen. And I think Yemen is particularly on the brink as well, and there's already massive food insecurity in that country that's been made worse by the ongoing conflict. But what we see across all those countries is climactic concerns, but really the impact of fighting, lack of humanitarian access, including attacks on aid workers who are simply trying to deliver assistance to people, which is really making the situation more and more dire for ordinary people.
I was in Somalia back in the 80s, racked by civil war and famine at that time. I mean, it was pretty much a failed state. Talk to me about these fragile governments in place as well. I mean, it's a mixture, isn't it? I mean, you're talking about conflict being a huge issue, but also the fabric of the government itself and that infrastructure.
Absolutely. I mean, Nigeria, which is one of the places where famine is a real risk, is one of the wealthiest countries on the continent of Africa. The resources are there. It's really about the armed conflict that's going on with Boko Haram, the response of the Nigerian government and the international community as well to support the people in need there. In South Sudan, on the other hand, you have a state that's a new country that emerged from decades of civil war, but being a new country really isn't an excuse for the lack of action that we're seeing, and in fact, for much of the counterproductive action that we're seeing, including really a widespread climate of impunity for attacks on aid workers and obstruction of humanitarian access.
Noah Gottschalk, thanks so much.